The naysayers always have an excuse, don't they? Cycling lanes won't work in the UK, they tell you. If it's not because of the wind, it's because of the rain, or the hills, or the old infrastructure, or the narrow streets. This isn't Holland, you know. It's Codswallop. Because, as we'll explore in this video, if these 5 cities can transform themselves into bike cities, any city can. With temperatures consistently over 40 degrees Celsius in the summer months, Seville is without doubt amongst the hottest places in Europe. Despite this, it's also managed to become one of the hottest spots for cycling in Europe too. This is thanks primarily to the building of countless segregated bike lanes which completely transformed the Spanish city almost overnight. A Guardian report suggested as few as 0.5% of journeys across Seville were made by bike for many decades. But change was afoot in the early 1990s when campaigners began pushing for an enhanced cycling provision across the city. Plans were eventually put in place and proved to be an unmitigated success. A full 80 kilometres of segregated lanes were designed and completed in one go by Manuel Calvo on what were previously parking spaces for cars. As a result, the average number of bikes used has risen from roughly to 6,000 to in excess of 70,000 per day. It has boosted the economy too, with about 50 bike shops in a city where there formerly was only roughly 10. Even in temperatures this demanding, it seems people will still make the most of bike lanes. They just have to be there in the first place. Notorious for its impatient drivers and busy streets, Paris is suddenly gaining a reputation for being another of Europe's most progressive and simply best cities for cycling. New protected bike lanes across France's capital have triggered a huge surge in the number of riders, with Curbed reporting that by September 2019, the number of Parisian cyclists had risen by 54% on 12 months prior. Meanwhile, the iconic Champs-Élysées is now lined with segregated bike lanes, and more residents of the Greater Paris area are now choosing bikes than the busiest line of the city's metro system. The left bank of the Seine River has virtually been free of motor traffic since 2016 too. Paris's success can be mostly attributed to the endeavours of Mayor Anne Hidalgo, who has fought tirelessly for improved cycling infrastructure since her election in 2014. A year later, she unveiled Plan Velo, a £135 million project to double the number of bike lanes by 2020, from 700 kilometres to 1,400 kilometres. The plans are about halfway through completion, but it's already done enough to change the way of life in the city. The statistics don't lie either. In Paris and its surrounding L'Île-de-France area, cyclists now make an average of 840,000 trips per day, which is even more than motorbikes or scooters. And with the passion and the money put into the project to transform Paris, it's not hard to see why it's become one of the best cities for biking. America is renowned for being a car-loving nation. That much is obvious. But in Portland, the largest city in the state of Oregon, that trend is being bucked somewhat. There, bikes have been on the rise for some years now and show no sign of slowing down anytime soon. It's an extremely safe place to ride as of June 2020. Only one fatality in the city involved a cyclist, following on from just 2 each of the whole of 2019 and the entirety of 2018. Why is Portland, Oregon a good city for biking? Because they've done cycling provision right, clearly. Writing in Grist in early 2014, Heather Smith said of visiting her sister, a resident of Portland, "When I visit her, I don't have to look at every car that I pass and gouge the risk of being doored, because in a lot of places, the bike lane is wide enough for both me and an open car door. I rarely have to merge into car traffic and route myself around someone who is double parked in the middle of a bike lane because some traffic engineer has thoughtfully placed a barrier between car and bike traffic." These days, Portland boasts the highest rate of bike commuters in all of US cities with 7%, and reportedly saves $115 million in healthcare costs thanks to the benefits of cycling. As recently as 2017, 374% more people in the city rode to work than in 2000, many of which using their near 400 miles of bike lanes. What is the most bike-friendly city, you ask? Nowadays, most people will say Amsterdam, and rightly so. After all, it's home to almost 900,000 bicycles and more than 500 kilometres of cycle paths. But this didn't used to be the case. In the 1950s and the 1960s, cyclists became increasingly sidelined by motorists as cars became the next big thing. Indeed, bicycle use during that period fell by about 6% per year. Fortunately, Amsterdam broke this trend. This was largely thanks to a movement in the 1970s called Stop de Kindermoord, meaning Stop the Child Murder. This campaign came about due to the danger that the large number of cars would bring into the city. And they had a point. In 1971, for instance, more than 3,000 people were killed by cars, 450 of which were children. This spawned a rethink in urban planning in the city, with people on bicycles prioritised over cars. Now, the numbers are staggering. Amsterdam citizens cycle a total of 2 million kilometres per day on average, with 58% of those older than 12 riding daily, many of whom will no doubt make use of the combined 767 kilometres of cycle paths and bike lanes in a city really like no other. Another extremely busy city, brimming with narrow streets and well-established roads, London has incrementally managed to make itself a much better and safer place to cycle. The public bicycle hire scheme, commonly known as Boris Bikes, was introduced by then Mayor of London Boris Johnson in 2010, which has gone to be the source of 73 million journeys across England's capital city. This showed the first real glimmer of hope for the biking community in London, who have since gone on to make use of the city's new cycle lanes, known as cycleways and cycle superhighways. They're certainly not stopping there. From 2010 to 2019, over £1.2 billion was spent improving cycling infrastructure in a bid to capitalise further on this success that saw the biggest annual increase in cycling numbers since records began. The average volume of cycling in the city is now estimated at an impressive 4 million kilometres each day. So it's clear that when cities truly commit to providing a safe place for cycling, people flock to their bikes. And if these 5 unlikely cities can become a success story for cycling, any city can.